All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to decode a highly symbolic, almost labyrinth-like dream narrative. We'll be looking at an incredibly vivid account pulled directly from our source text, which is simply titled A Dreamscape's Shifting Realities. And honestly, what makes this so fascinating is how it perfectly captures the way our subconscious minds process really complex real-world information. So let's map out this shifting landscape together and see exactly how history, faith, and personal memory collide inside our heads.
Just listen to this profound opening summary from the dreamer. They say, I am the labyrinth you wander through, a woven tapestry where the sacred, the personal, and the chaotic intersect. I mean, that perfectly sets the stage for the journey we're about to take into the depths of the subconscious, doesn't it? This isn't just a jumble of random, disjointed imagery. It's a very specific, carefully constructed intersection of heavy history, religious faith, and deeply personal anxiety. Section 1. Echoes of History, the Journey Begins. Okay, so every dream has a starting point, and this particular descent begins at the macro level, in a geographically recognizable place, the small town of Peterbar. On one side, we have this massive historical rumor, the belief that the Babri Masjid originally stood right there in Peterbar. Now, just as a quick aside, we absolutely aren't taking any political or religious sides here today. We're just impartially explaining how the source material neutrally holds these two intense ideas together, because juxtaposed against that immense historical weight is a jarring modern reality, the sudden, recent news of a terrorist being captured in that exact same town. The real takeaway here is how the dreamer's mind manages to balance these two extremes. You've got deeply entrenched historical myths on one hand and immediate, violent present-day news on the other. It's wild to see the brain process these significant cultural touchstones so neutrally, literally holding two intense realities in the exact same physical space without taking a stance. Section 2. The Skeletal Sacred, a Fractured Pilgrimage. From the heavy history of that town, the dream suddenly shifts away from a real geographic location and morphs into this fractured, highly surreal religious pilgrimage. So here, the dreamer finds themselves on a tour of the Ram Mandir, but it has this bizarre living museum vibe to it. There's a toy train actually carrying visitors through the complex, rolling past carvings and these mythic light and sound displays that feel a lot like Delhi's Akshardham temple. And right smack in the middle of this grand religious spectacle, there's just pure mundane innocence. The dreamer is wandering around with childhood friends, stopping to pose for photos, and a friend named Nitin is mischievously demanding an extra laddu. Because honestly, even in a profound, surreal dreamscape, there's always going to be that one friend who just wants snacks, right? It's such a brilliant illustration of how our minds combine grand, awe-inspiring settings with hyper-specific, ordinary memories from our youth. But then, that innocent, sacred mood just totally shatters. The raw reality of a construction site forcefully intrudes. The mandir is still skeletal. We're talking raw cement pillars jutting up against the sky and heavy machinery just crawling around the grounds. And what really drives the emotional shift here is a sudden flare of anger from the dreamer. People are walking around wearing chappals or sandals in a place where sanctity is supposed to reign. That raw, unrefined reality of construction, combined with this deep feeling of disrespect, completely overpowers that earlier museum-like wonder. Which leads us to a deeply resonant moment. Right in the midst of all that heavy machinery and perceived disrespect, the dreamer encounters a weary, resigned priest who simply laments, "This temple does not match the vision." It's an incredibly powerful statement of disillusionment, just resting right in the middle of this skeletal, unfinished site. And that feeling of disillusionment physically manifests at the very center of the temple. Instead of a proud, seated figure, the dreamer finds a strange, reclining, and almost broken black Ram Lala idol. The source describes it as half-sleeping. Think about why this matters for a second. When we process major cultural symbols in our subconscious, our brains often project our own internal uncertainties onto them. We end up warping something historically powerful into something incredibly fragile. Section 3. Chaos and Temporal Distortions. Reality Tears Apart. Now, this is where the explainer really accelerates. The whole structure of the dream starts to break down, and time and reality begin to violently tear apart. Time suddenly bends, and we're hit with this incredibly intense, contradictory image. The dreamer's father appears on a kabaddi field, but he's not as he is today. He exists in this impossible in-between age. His hair is gray, but his body is young and fierce. The dreamer watches him lunge, collide, get trapped under the defense, but then rise back up for another raid. It's such a striking visual, mixing enduring physical strength with the inescapable, creeping passage of time.
And just like that, the rules change again. That structured, albeit fierce, kabaddi match totally dissolves into a chaotic, splashing fight in shallow water with thrashing bodies. What's super fascinating here is where this imagery comes from. According to the text, the dreamer associates this specific chaos with a reel they recently saw of a Nepali minister being beaten while fleeing. Our minds literally rip footage right out of our waking lives, social media reels, random news clips, and stitch them directly into our deepest personal memories to manufacture a sense of panic. Adding to all that chaos is this fleeting, unresolved scene. Somewhere else in the dreamscape, a prisoner is crawling through a hidden hole, disappearing into a secret passage. But the escape is left completely unfinished. Talk about a perfect illustration of lingering anxiety, right? The brain opens up this narrative loop of escape and deliberately leaves it wide open, which just dials up the psychological tension of the entire dream. Section 4. The Shrine of Guilt, Sacred and Personal. Okay, let's slow the pacing down a bit here, because we've reached the deepest, most intimate, and frankly, the most uncomfortable core of the dreamer's mind. Here we encounter a massive spatial distortion. The subconscious takes two completely disparate locations and just forces them together. On one hand, you have the Sri Ayyappa temple, which is a setting of deep, sacred devotion. On the other hand, you have the dreamer's old schoolyard, specifically the junior wing, which is a space remembered entirely for temptation and judgment. The dream blends these two into a single, cohesive, yet entirely distorted reality. It's half shrine, half schoolyard. So how exactly does this play out? First, the dreamer finds themselves stranded and totally isolated in this junior wing. Second, the atmosphere gets incredibly tense as seniors arrive, circling like predators drawn toward the girls. And third, and this is the real emotional climax of the dream, overwhelming waves of guilt and past judgments just suddenly wash over the dreamer. They are entirely trapped in this highly charged environment of their own making. So what does all this guilt actually represent? Well, this youthful guilt is a heavy, lingering emotion tied directly to very specific, uncomfortable memories of being called names for awkward approaches in the past. What you should really take away from this is just how incredibly powerful personal emotion is. Notice how this deeply personal, almost embarrassing anxiety completely overrides all the massive external symbols we saw earlier. The historical weight of the town, the grand construction of the mandir, the chaotic newsreels. None of it matters as much as this feeling. In the end, the labyrinth of the mind always leads right back to the self. And that brilliantly illustrates the true nature of our subconscious. It takes the noise of the world, the heavy news, the historical rumors, the religious devotion, and it filters absolutely all of it through our own internal insecurities and memories. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought to consider. When our minds build these complex labyrinths of memory, faith, and chaos, are we actually seeking sanctuary, or are we just trying to escape our own history? Think about that the next time you wake up from a dream that felt just a little too real. I hope you enjoyed mapping out this fascinating narrative today. Keep exploring those inner landscapes and keep seeking to understand the complex ways we process the world around us.